We are now officially recording.
Welcome, everyone, from wherever you are in whatever part of the world. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College, one of the co-sponsors of this breakfast roundtable, better known as the monthly roundtable breakfast that's co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York, ACRGNY, and the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College. This morning is our 286th gathering since 9/11, when I started these events at John Jay, so that we could get together to talk about how we could respond as dispute resolvers. Each month, we are thrilled to have a wonderful committee of colleagues who work on putting these breakfasts together, including Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, Sherston Pugh, and Chloe Choi. Between 9/11 and the pandemic, we always met in person. Since April 2020, we've been meeting online, and these sessions are recorded. The recordings are posted. Nikki will put some links in the chat so that you can access the recordings on both ACRGNY's website, the dispute resolution website at John Jay College, and on YouTube. We are so delighted each month to have with us our colleagues who will share some area of interest that they have developed. And we're thrilled this month to have Dr. Zaza Elsheikh with us from London, or the UK, I think, probably more accurately, and she'll tell us more about herself and her work shortly. But before I do that, two things. One is the May breakfast, what we used to always call the breakfast. It is the round table, will be in person. I know many of you have been asking about if and when we'll meet. We're trying to aim for one meeting in the fall and one in the spring. So this will be our spring gathering. The presenter will be Giuseppe Di Paolo, who's going to head up a team of mediators who will be challenging us to think about the role of AI in our field. You know, can AI manage our conflicts the way mediators do? So it'll be really exciting to take a look into the future. We will not be holding an online session in May. We will record it. We will post it along with all of the other recordings, but that session will not be live. So please do pop in if you're going to be in the New York area in May. Okay, the other announcement, I'm going to turn over to Sherston so that she can share some information from our other co-sponsor, ACRGNY. Sherston, take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome to everyone. And Maria, congratulations on 286. I was just reflecting on that, and that's such an accomplishment. And also to everyone in this room too, because we all keep this moving forward together. So hats off again, Maria. And good morning from the East Coast. My name is Sherston Pugh. I am the Deputy Program Director of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program at Columbia University, and I'm also wearing my other hat today, which is as a board member of the ACRGNY. Last month, I mentioned that we have our upcoming annual conference. The theme is Cartographies of Conflict, which I'm pretty thrilled about, and it will take place mostly virtually from June 3rd to June 6th. And in exciting news, our early bird registration is live. I just put a link in the chat, so we really do invite all of you to join us. You'll also, in case you register and can't make every single session, as a registrant, you'll receive a recording of the panels as well. So please do join us if you can, and thank you very much. And again, congratulations to Maria and us all on this longevity.
Thank you, everyone, for making this possible. You're absolutely right. It takes a village for to raise a child, and it takes a village for us to keep this going. Just so that you know, June will be Nancy Welsh from Texas A&M Law School, and July speaker will be Jim Malamed from Mediate.com, who I think will also be focusing on AI-related matters. So we have some really interesting sessions coming up. We are actually booked through November, so do join us every month. And now to introduce our wonderful speaker is Nikki Borowski. But before you do that, what's really exciting, we got to Zaza through a former speaker at one of our earlier breakfasts, who's from London, Idil Alvarez, wrote to me and said, I know someone who would do a wonderful presentation for the breakfast. And I reached out to Zaza, and here we are, all connected. It truly does take a village. So if you think of individuals that we should, whose work we should share with each other, please let us know. And with that, Nikki, please introduce Zaza to the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. It's completely my honor to speak with you all today and to introduce this phenomenal speaker. I'm going to go a little long, but she's absolutely incredible. Today we're diving into one of the most quietly influential and often invisible forces mediators face: shame. This rarely announces itself. It's not written into case summaries or declared in opening statements, but it's an undercurrent behind silence. It can spark sudden outbursts, and it's often the reason why parties dig in or sabotage agreements that might make sense otherwise. Shame can cloud our judgment, it can drive escalation, and if unrecognized, it can often derail even the best prepared mediator or conflict resolution specialist. Today, our speaker, we are very lucky to have Dr. Zaza Johnson Elsheikh, and she knows this terrain firsthand. Across 2 decades, she's built a remarkable practice spanning commercial, clinical, family, workplace, and faith-based disputes in settings where shame isn't just present, but it's often central to the discussion. She is a distinguished fellow of the International Academy of Mediators and a member of the CEDR faculty in London and in the United Kingdom. She is an accredited international commercial arbitrator through the CIArb, and her expertise doesn't stop there. She's also a former medical doctor and clinical negligence solicitor, which gives her rare insight into the conflicts of law, medicine, and human vulnerability all colliding in complexity. For 15 years, Dr. Zaza has led a busy UK-based mediation practice where she handles cases involving negligence, end-of-life decisions, inheritance battles, school and workplace disputes. She's expanded her work internationally with a focus on culturally grounded conflict resolution. She is a Muslim faith leader and co-founder of Belief in Mediation and Arbitration, a pioneering charity that promises early intervention in disputes within and between faith communities. And for those of you who are celebrating Ramadan and Eid that just happened, Ramadan Mubarak, today Zaza will explore with us what shame looks like in the room. Her approach inspired the paper Inviting the Elephant into the Room: Culturally Oriented Mediation and Peace Practice. And this work challenged us to confront unspoken forces, among them shame, so that we can determine whether resolution is even possible and what it looks like. So, um, we've spoken with Zaza. She's going to have a great slideshow. We will be able to share this with you afterwards. I want you to all be invited to raise your hand if you have a question during her presentation, and we'll invite you to pop in and ask the question. If you prefer, you can always write in the chat your question, and we will intervene and ask her. But it should be a dialogue, so feel free to raise your hand if you have questions. And at the end, there'll be a little bit of time for the balance of questions. Um, thank you so much, Zaza, for joining us. Welcome, and you have the table.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for some, and maybe even good evening for others. So good morning. Really, really excited to be here. I've been counting down the days to this, so I'm sure that we're going to have a wonderful time together. So this is the plan, the roundtable plan, and just for us to know where we're headed. And really the first that I want to talk about is the sources of my insight. So some has been mentioned. Commercial. So today we're going to be going through some commercial and a family case as well. And so there are 3 cases in total, and one of them is a commercial presentation, but actually a family dispute. Which I mediated yesterday, so it's fresh off the hob, so to speak. So that's in terms of mediation. In terms of mentoring, some of you may also be involved in this, but maybe only a few of you are involved in the kind of mentoring that I spend at least 2 days a week on, which is those who are at risk of radicalization, including incels. So that's a new area of practice for me now. And those who are convicted already of terrorist offenses. And what I can tell you from the outset is that terrorists are still people. You know, they have their hopes, their aspirations, they want their children to do well. Obviously, they have some thoughts and references which are entirely different from most of us, but they are just people with the same sorts of fears and hopes. Facilitation, so a number of my facilitations have been between the state, so government and community, one of them being terror survivors, so specifically those who survived or family members of people who were killed in a terrorist attack in Susa in Tunisia. And so there were a number of people, unfortunately, who were killed in that attack. A number did survive, but even those who survived, often it was that all the rest of their family had died in the attack. So, you know, we're talking a family of 5, so 2 parents, 3 adult children, and only one of the parents survived. And how they wanted the state to respond to these kinds of situations. And also Windrush as well, which is, many of you may not know about it, but it's about very early immigrants. At the time, they weren't immigrants, they were British citizens. So this is 1948 through to 1981. Specifically from Africa and from the Caribbean islands, who were British subjects, but then when their countries achieved independence, they lost those rights some years later, the rights to citizenship, but it wasn't clear to them at the time. So they lost access to education, to all sorts of health as well. Yeah, so there was a big, it was called Windrush Scandal in 2018. And then in terms of interfaith tensions, this was previously all sorts of faith groups and still is, but primarily Jews and Muslims, so British Jews and Muslims, making sure that the conflict in the Middle East doesn't lead to complete polarization. So that definitely is the case. There is polarization here. And so our work is really about trying to mitigate that. So now the learning objectives today is to consider the facets of one's identity. So I'll talk a little bit about that, particularly in the context of conflict, to identify some issues in these commercial and family scenarios, which are all based on real life cases. As I say, one as recently as yesterday. Recognize and respond to expressions of shame is what the title is, so that will definitely be in it. And consider the impact of the mediator's cognitive and cultural biases. So yes, yes, only yesterday I was speaking to Professor Hal Abramson, and we were talking about the difference between projection and empathy. So there's a mention of him, and then reframing offensive / shaming statements. All of us have, as mediators, have had that sort of clangor moment where you just want to shrivel up and disappear because of what's said, but of course you have to react and react positively so that you detoxify what's just been said so you can move forward. And that primarily is through refocusing the parties on the interests. So, identity. So this is just one way of looking at identity, so religion and culture. And I know that you've already been informed that I'm a Muslim faith leader, but I have been mistaken on 3 occasions for being a reverend mother. I don't know how that happened, but there we are. I was in the wrong place, I guess. I was in a church at the time, but I thought it was clear that I'm Muslim, but there we are. And also even responding to that, you know, not to say, no, of course not, but to say, that's really wonderful that you think that I'm a reverend mother, but actually I'm only a Muslim faith leader, you know. So viability is something that is really important as well. Will it be possible to implement this settlement, the settlement that they've reached? Will it be possible? Maybe because of the law of the land, it's not possible. It may be in the countries of origin that it would be possible, but in this context where they are now, it's not possible, and so on and so forth. We'll dig a little deeper into that as we go through the cases, and that's me. And possibly you in these cases. So, shame. Let's get into it now. So roll up your sleeves, here we come, yeah? So, shame can appear in so many different guises. Shame can be this no entry, no, you're not allowed here. One of the messages that I wanted to share with you is a belief of mine that we really should be not so selective in terms of mediators. So often what I'm seeing, because I get those cases are referred to me, particularly in family, where somebody says, you know, oh, it's a Ghanaian couple, so we wouldn't be able to help them. We're wondering if you could see it, to see the couple. So this is another service who's referring a case that approached them. And they say, for instance, about this Ghanaian couple that, you know, they have drinks and they have all sorts of things in their dowries that, you know, it's just too complicated. Could you please deal with it, Zaza? So that for me in of itself is reducing the skill set of mediators, because it means that they're not exposing themselves to mediating cases where they're not highly familiar with what's happening. And also always when I'm talking about such topics, I say, you know, never Google about somebody's culture or religion, you know, because there's such a risk that you'll go in there with assumptions and the people in front of you may not be conforming to that particular article or, you know, input on Google, you know, and you just end up putting your foot in your mouth. So always just asking questions. There's been a number of times, certainly more than a handful, where somebody has referred to our firm, so at the time Commercial and Medical Dispute Solutions, and they have been Muslim parties, and they've said, you know, please, I don't want a Muslim mediator. What is that about? Anybody got any ideas why they wouldn't, as Muslim parties, want a Muslim mediator? Anyone?
I guess I'm gonna jump in. They might be thinking that by being Muslim, it will be assumed that they follow all the Muslim traditions and rules, and they don't want to be biased with that.
That's very close to it. Thank you so much, Meltem. Thank you. Very close to it. What has also been said at the time is that I don't want to be judged. Yeah. So it was more that outcome, fear of an outcome. You know, you're right on it in terms of, you know, following all the practices, but there's also, unfortunately, this is a reality in communities that I work with, that confidentiality isn't understood well. And so I remember in a case which was an end of life case, so this was an adult, usually they're children, but this was an adult. And there were a group of women from the community who were helping this woman in her end of life stage. And her tumor had, which originated in the colon, had spread to lungs, liver. You know, she was a very close friend of mine. And now it had spread to her brain. So there was a metastasis in the brain. So she asked for this to be kept confidential. I said, absolutely. There were 4 of us around her bed at the time, and she said, just you, no further. We had a WhatsApp group to support her. Before I could get home, it was all over the WhatsApp group. So one of that 4 had spilt the beans, and when I asked her in as kind a way as I could muster up at the time, she said to me, and this is somebody who's, you know, university graduate, said, but confidentiality means that she shouldn't know that other people know. Yeah. And she was absolutely serious. Yes. So that is another fear of people, why they consider that a Muslim mediator would be more proximate to their community and maybe things would spill out. So there it is, shame as well. That's a fear of becoming ashamed. So what is shame? This is a definition that I think is very descriptive of it. So this sense, it's a belief by the person who's feeling the shame that they have somehow committed an irredeemable deviation. So it's not just a deviation, that's one level of maybe an embarrassment, but to feel that one has committed some action or omission which is irredeemable in terms of their micro-community's norms. So whether it's a community of mediators, whether it's a community of culturally, commonality, a cultural commonality between those people, or religious commonality, that micro community is their reference point. So if they think that that micro community would not be pleased about what's been said, done, not done, that is to me where the shame comes from. Okay, so now for somebody who is one of your fellow Americans, who I very much admire, and it would be wonderful if somebody does know him, Professor Gilligan, if somebody does know him, if you could introduce me, that would be a huge win from this. So he's, for 30 years now, conducted research on anger and violence in men in hospitals and prisons. So the hospitals have been mental health units, and prisons for quite serious crimes. And he considers that I have yet to see a serious act of violence that was not provoked by the experience of feeling shamed and humiliated, disrespected, and ridiculed. And that did not represent the attempt to prevent or undo this loss of face. So it's that feeling that you've done something, that irredeemable act, omission, speech, and then you now commit an act, a serious act of violence, to be able to prevent or undo. So in a number of the cases that I've done, which are in the article that Nikki spoke about at the beginning, inviting the elephant into the room, there is a case there, which was actually my very first case of its category, which was shame-triggered violence, as opposed to honor-based violence. I call it shame-triggered violence because that's what it is. Honor has got nothing to do with the actions that they commit. I know that that's where they're trying to get to, but yeah, I prefer to call it shame-triggered violence. And in that case, this lady, all that she did was marry her sister's ex-husband. So nothing illegal about what she did, nothing religious-wise that was sinful, but just culturally for their micro community, that was an absolute no-no. And I know that across the world, you know, that could raise an eyebrow. Really? You know, would you want to do that kind of thing? But it's nothing that would make anybody in your family threaten to kill you. And in this case, that was exactly where we were. So often when I've thought about shame and thinking this is very broad assumption, sort of a working theory or trend even, I would say, rather than theory, that men fear being seen as weak. For instance, misogyny, you know, trying to be bigger than women, not just physically, but, you know, in all sense of the word, more powerful than women, which is the opposite of weak, being powerful. They want to feel powerful, be seen as powerful. And women often, those who identify as women often fear disappointment, being a disappointment, whether it's their physical characteristics, as a mother, as a wife. And that's where I see a lot of coercive relationships being rooted in this sense of shame that, you know, okay, let me, you know, I'm going to be the perfect wife, you know, I'm going to have, unfortunately, you know, restrict my eating so that my size can be much smaller, so that I can be pretty, so that I'm not a disappointment, yeah? So, as I say, this is just a working thought of mine rather than a theory per se. And in terms of the perpetrators of domestic violence, murderers and terrorists, so I work with the first and the third group. Domestic violence is also another area of interest for me. I see that there are men predominantly, but there are also women, and particularly in the terrorist group, that a number of my women clients are actually seeking to achieve something, to make their lives feel like they were worth something, that they've achieved something. And that's how ISIS or Daesh was able to really plug into many women's insecurities about what their lives meant by offering to marry them, that they would be wives of martyrs and people who changed the world, etc., etc., etc. So those are my thoughts on that, building on Professor James Gilligan's work and his wife, Carol Gilligan, as well. So, expression of shame by parties. So again, I would like some feedback from you. So how do you ordinarily expect shame to show up? I've given you one prompt, and let's see what else you can think of. Anyone?
Anger at the other person from the chat. Giving
Okay.
in.
Great.
Extreme avoidance.
Extreme avoidance, absolutely.
Defensiveness, shutting down, appeasing or fawning, withdrawal.
Fantastic. Those are all perfect. So they may be very quietly spoken. When you ask them an open question, it may very much be yes, no, as if it was a closed question, you know, that you're really having to pull information out of them. However, they can also be quite defensive, confrontational, and even intimidating, you know. And so one of the things that I thought about a few years ago was that here in the UK, we were taught many years ago, 19 years ago now, I was taught mediation. And at that time, and I think subsequently it's also been mentioned in various courses, that there was something that we called the 3-strike rule. So if somebody interrupted, a party speaking, the other party interrupts, you say, thank you so much, Mr. Smith. I know that you want to speak, but you remember the ground rules, turn taking, please don't interrupt. Yeah. Second time round, let's say Mr. Smith has interrupted again, he's getting more and more agitated, and you say, now, Mr. Smith, you know the ground rules. Now, if you continue to interrupt, I'll have no choice but to separate you, go into separate meetings. And then the third time you say, okay, Mr. Smith, this isn't quite working, we'll have to separate. Yeah. Some mediators might even, depending on how aggressive Mr. Smith has started to seem, may even say that we'll have to stop the mediation for today. Yeah. Now, how does that make Mr. Smith feel?
Ashamed.
Yep, right there. Yes. So I thought, what, by doing that, I understand the sense of it, and to keep order in the process is very important, keeping to that process, keeping the fairness, the safety of it, with no interruptions. But actually, I've compounded Mr. Smith's shame. Yeah, so I'm working on the assumption that there may be some shame. I'm not saying definitely, but there may be some shame here. And I've just compounded it. By trying to keep it a safe environment, I've just compounded his shame. I've embarrassed, humiliated him in front of Mr. Jones, for instance, because I've told him off effectively, no matter how nicely I may have done it, and quietly even. And so I thought that it would be better for me, and I'm just talking about me and my practice, it would be advantageous for me to say, Mr. Smith, I know what you've got to say is so important. It will really help us to listen if you allow Mr. Brown to finish first, and then we can listen to you. Yeah. In that way, really elevating Mr. Smith, notwithstanding the bad behavior socially, that what would be considered bad and impolite behavior, that it's elevating Mr. Smith and letting him know that I've heard him, that I value him, without demeaning Mr. Jones to say, oh, Mr. Smith is better than you, his story is more important. Okay. Any comments on that? Anybody wildly disagree with me?
There was one question about how you characterize shame as different from embarrassment or blame.
Yes. Okay. So blaming oneself is often a feature of guilt, which is something that is, internal. So nobody need know about my guilt. Yeah. It's something internal, almost like an internal dilemma. But shame is my fear of what others think of me. Yeah, so I think I'm an embarrassment, so embarrassment can be in it. And I would say that embarrassment, humiliation are on the spectrum. So the least, in my view, the least is embarrassment, then humiliation, then shame. Yeah. So recently I had a situation where I was chairing a meeting, and somebody who was online, it was an online meeting, and somebody had her camera on when she hadn't realized that she had her camera on. And I'm not going to say what happened, but many would identify that as embarrassing or humiliating. Because certain items of clothing were being removed. Some, depending on their cultural and religious references, would now be ashamed of what happened. And that person, that lady, has never appeared at another meeting, although she was a high-profile member of that community. So decision making, I just wanted to also touch on that. So we already I've said that any relationships where that person's vulnerability may be exposed, they try to avoid it. Yeah, they're avoiding that. So in a mediation context, it may be that, let's say in a workplace scenario, it may be that, no, I don't want to work at the same station as that colleague. Yes, it's okay, fine, we've got settlement, but I don't want that because I don't want the risk of that feeling re-emerging, or maybe the settlement has happened, but my feeling of shame is still there. So therefore I can't work at the same station as that person. I'll stay in the same workplace, but not that proximate. Then decision making, because of the mistrust, the preferred options can be looking for only the tangible outcomes. None of this, okay, you can meet for coffee maybe once a month, have a check-in with each other, see how things are going. No, thank you very much. I would rather, for instance, have a review by another colleague, and my colleague that I've had the conflict with also gets reviewed by that same third party, and then I get fed back that information. I don't want to have any direct contact where there's decision making to be made. Okay, right. So here we are. We're at the first case. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite your thoughts about what the issues are in these cases, and then I would like you to also consider one of the offensive statements that happened in the case, okay? For us to see if we can reframe it. So Mr. Khan, the sole owner of Yum, a London-based restaurant, offered to sell it to Mr. Smith. Not that same Mr. Smith we were talking about. This is a different Mr. Smith, who had been the chef of Yum for 20 years for 650,000 sterling. Mr. Smith indicated that he was very keen to proceed. And some of you may already be guessing what this is about. In reliance on the sale to Mr. Smith, Mr. Khan proceeded to purchase a property development business for £1 million. Yeah, he wanted to explore new pastures, leave the restaurant of many years behind him. When Mr. Smith, a strong Catholic, informed Mr. Khan about his decision not to proceed, after all, with the purchase, because he preferred to purchase a large soup kitchen for the homeless in Glasgow, which really fed into his spiritual side, Mr. Khan was outraged. Mr. Khan's solicitors suggested mediation. So, your thoughts? What issues have we got here? What's going on?
One person, Mr. Hahn, thought that there was an agreement to purchase. And Mr. Smith may have just thought that it was I'm interested.
Sure.
That's why it's important. That's why it's important to have a written agreement before proceeding with a big financial investment.
Yes. I think you were trying to shame Mr. Khan. You should have thought about this, Mr. Khan.
Well, the question would have been, have you had any written agreement?
No, there was none. It was verbal. Yeah. It was in the kitchen, and Mr. Smith was delighted. He said, thank you so much. I'm really keen. The words very keen came through. I'm very keen to proceed.
From the chat, we've got disappointment, we've got different understandings of the notion of very keen, the perhaps betrayal, different ideas about respect, embarrassment, that maybe the funds aren't there to make the purpose, the meaning or understanding of an oral agreement, a violation of honor, a bargain is a bargain, a deal is a deal. Mr. Khan may draw inference that he is considered spiritually bereft, perhaps, because of the confines of the choice.
Okay.
There's definitely a cultural component.
Okay, sure. Any more, or shall I now tell you what? else was there? So
I
those
want
are
to add something if it's okay. I just was thinking, when I read it, I was thinking that, Mr. Khan, he was, upset because he had set expectations about what was going to happen. And so when those expectations were kind of broken off and, he realized, hey, Mr. Smith didn't have the same intentions behind this, this whole offer, he really thought it was set in stone. And when, that kind of came down, it didn't work out so well for Mr. Khan as he had expected. So it's that, when something kind of shakes you, when there's a challenge that kind of like impedes on the expected success that you're, hoping for, what happens then? And it happens in our everyday lives sometimes, like something goes wrong where we don't expect, oh my gosh, this just happened to me. What am I going to do? So that's what I was thinking about when I read it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution. So one of the things that I haven't included this slide here, but one of the things that I say is the origins of conflict is a mismatch of expectations. Yeah. So, I mean, if there's anybody at all religious here, you could even think that right from the origins of man, if you're thinking of Genesis, that, God was disappointed in Adam, that expectation, do not touch the tree. In Islam, it's do not touch the tree. In others, it's do not eat the fruit. So right from there, but in any relationship, personal relationship, business relationship, expectation is everything. If you have a mismatch of expectation, you then have a dislocation in communication, and that dislocation in communication has resentment, has disappointment in it, and then you have a conflict, an unresolved conflict in front of you. So, okay, so I just wanted to highlight that there was a high trust relationship at the beginning of this. So the fall was even, steeper, because this isn't, just a sale where you've just met or haven't even met. It's the lawyers who've met. This is friends, colleagues who have agreed, apparently, allegedly, on a sale. In legal terms, one has relied upon it. You could talk about things like proprietary estoppel, all sorts of legal terminologies, but let's just restrict ourselves to the sort of simpler features of this. Mr. Khan actually wasn't able to proceed with the £1 million purchase. He had exchanged contracts. I'm not sure if it's the same in America, but the first step, legally binding step, the contract for sale had been exchanged, and now he would not be able to complete without that sale, the sale of the business. So in the mediation, Mr. Smith said, I'm really sorry. There was also a level of embarrassment, maybe humiliation, maybe even shame on Mr. Smith's part, that his friend and colleague had relied on him, that his friend and colleague is now blaming him for reneging when he didn't mean to bind himself legally to this. So, it's not just Mr. Khan, it's also Mr. Smith who's feeling very badly about this. Yes, it was for altruistic reasons that he moved, changed his mind, homeless in Glasgow, but nevertheless, these feelings are running high. So I wanted now just to show you verbatim the statement that was made, and that one of the types of shame can be shame about naivety. Yeah, so here, as somebody was just saying, that shouldn't have done it until you got it in writing. Yeah, so there can be this shame from naivety, which we could also link to a couple of slides earlier when I talked about men and weakness, the fear of appearing weak. So this is what he said. I can see your eyebrows raising, Nikki, higher and higher.
I can hear the voice in my head of the betrayal.
Yes, yes. So, what do people hear or see in this? Beyond betrayal, what else is there?
Well, clearly the use of "you people" indicates very strongly that there's a cultural issue here between the two of them, and that that phraseology indicates a bias, I would say.
Yes.
I also hear some control through inflicting shame. It's trying to control the circumstances or the feelings by making the other person feel shame.
I got it. Yeah, lovely, lovely. So, if you don't feel small, I'm going to make you feel small. Yeah. And the reference here is "you people." You don't know honor. I know honor. My people know honor. You people are less. Yes. Okay. And
I'm
yes.
wondering, was this before or after Brexit?
This case was definitely well before Brexit.
I was going to say, because the way that people of color were treated after Brexit would have amplified, you people, and the gulf between the understanding of honor and, you broke off from the UK just because you didn't want brown people harshing your buzz. But wow, this happened even before.
Is the issue of "you people" really personal, or is it Mr. Khan believing that he has gotten past that, but now when something like this happens, it becomes, this is the way we as a group are still treated?
What are you saying?
No,
I thought we were past it, but I was wrong, and I'm ashamed.
I think "I should have known better" is a statement that says there was already an existing bias that was then confirmed by this experience.
Spot on. Perfect. Well done. Well done. Yes. So people around Mr. Khan were saying,
Sorry, I'm gonna mute people with lots of background so we can benefit from your full clear voice.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for not shaming anyone. That was lovely the way you did that. Yes. Okay. So yes, so absolutely. Thank you so much for spotting that. I should have known better. There's also "I treated you like a brother." So there's, notwithstanding what other people might be saying from Mr. Khan's community, why haven't you been doing business with somebody from our community, for instance, yeah? That Mr. Khan quite rightly has sought to do business with somebody else, somebody beyond his community. And now that he's been burnt, in quotes, he's had his fingers burnt, there's this sort of, the guilt, there's the shame, embarrassment in front of his community that people might say, told you so, told you this would happen. Yeah, because the deviation that he made, which many of us, if not all of us, would celebrate. Wow, this is amazing, that you've gone, you're a diverse workforce, yeah? Yeah, so this is a number of the features here. So maybe Mr. Smith was feeling some level of embarrassment, but arguably, and I'm not saying this definitively, arguably, Mr. Khan was feeling not just let down, because he says, "I treated you like a brother," and then should have known better. So what would you say if this was just said? How would you reframe it? Detoxifying it.
We have silence when there's a request for the hard work.
There's no shame if you get it wrong.
Leanne.
Yeah, one of the things I would do would be to first try to break down the message with respect to the needs that both parties had. So what were Mr. Khan's needs? What were Mr. Smith's needs? And then use that as a way of bridging some understanding and empathy with the other.
So let's hear it then, Leanne.
I would say that Mr. Khan was needing more, let's see, consideration, more flexibility, more. It was like it wasn't a good fit for him after some time of thinking about it, right? So
what would you say?
More choice in the matter.
Okay.
And then for Mr. Smith, I would say maybe some more, he was needing more, I don't know, consideration again, need for reliability, need for, yeah, I think that reliability really comes up strong for me.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Anyone else? And then I'll give an example of that.
I would say I've injured you and I'm sorry. Can we talk?
Okay, all right. So
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Finish your thoughts. I just wanted to mention something. Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, from Mr. Khan's perspective, I think that, like, I guess to detoxify the way that he had mentioned it, I would have said something, to Mr. Smith, like, keeping our friendship or our relationship is important to me, and being able to have that reassurance of your expectations and making sure that your intentions meet mine and that we're on the same page is really helpful, so that I don't feel like, I'm being ripped off in some way, or feel like, you're changing your mind all of a sudden, and then, something like that, like, just to talk about, like, how this personally affects him, so that it takes away, like, the kind of like the nastiness of how he's approaching it, and placing blame and shame onto Mr. Smith, and making it about, this is my experience and this is why it hurt me, and this is how we could work it out together in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. So what I'm also thinking is, in order for us to lift the mood, because you'll imagine Mr. Smith hearing this, I mean, it was, to my mind, crushing, let alone to Mr. Smith. I felt embarrassed, not ashamed, but embarrassed just hearing it, because it sounded quite poisonous, to be saying you people. Yeah. So for me, it was that I was like, oh, the brother should have known better was okay, but the you people, because each mediator, a particular aspect of what's been said will, move them more than another piece. So I see Javier's hand up.
Javier.
Javier, sorry, Javier.
To detoxify this statement, I think I would have to tell Mr. Smith. Mr. Khan wanted you to understand that this offer he made was preferential. It is something that he would have offered to a family member, not just a friend. So backing out feels to him like a betrayal. And I'm just looking at the statement. I don't think I would bring anything else in. He says for him, there are larger implications on your friendship because of how he's impacted here. That's what he wants you to understand. And then, Mr. Khan, is that correct? Yeah, I think that's where I would go to try to keep it as clean as possible.
Yeah. Not take the meaning away, keep the mood up. Yeah. Thank you so much, Javier. Kim.
Yeah, I think I guess just from the style of mediation that I do, I would reflect his disappointment and his, you trusted Mr. Smith. You had this expectation that he would come through and it didn't happen for you. So reflecting kind of his disappointment, his anger, that piece of it, I think, to validate like what he's feeling about it, that I think that's one of the things I would do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. And is it Maya?
It's Maya.
Maya. Okay. I did think, is it Maya? But no, maybe it isn't. Okay, go ahead, Maya. Thank you,
No,
Maya.
for me, it's I wouldn't detoxify it necessarily. I wouldn't, I mean, because there is something toxic here that needs to come out. There is something that Mr. Smith has done that Mr. Khan perceives as very toxic. And in my experience, admittedly not as long an experience as many of the people here, addressing the aspect, you people have no understanding about it. It's like, I hear you saying that, there's a piece of honor in this for you that goes hand in hand with treating him like a brother. He's somebody that you trusted to be kind of like one of your people. And now he's demonstrated exactly how other he is. And you're having feelings about that. And I would invite the feelings to come out rather than being papered over or made positive.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Maya, for that contribution as well. I know that Meltem, you've got your hand up, but just because of time passing by, hopefully you'll get another chance because we've got 2 more cases to go. So forgive me for that. What I would do, I would move to interests, and one of the interests here, so focus the parties' thinking on the interest. So this is venting, and quite rightly, as one of you said, vent, let them vent. Understood, Maya, as well, that you were mentioning that. So what I would say is that, Mr. Khan, I can see how important or valuable the relationship with Mr. Smith was to you. Yeah, that's not me taking away anything, yeah, other than, I'm not talking about honor, dishonor, but important to you, how much it meant to you, how precious it was to you. And then that can bring Mr. Smith hears that as, okay, he does still care about me or did care about me. Maybe there's a way back from this, because we're now in calamity zone, yeah, with anger and all these feelings. But looking at the interest, one of the interests is money, the other interest is relationship. Even these men, walk away from each other, that there could perhaps be some relationship that's preserved. So next case, wash your minds of Mr. Khan and Mr. Smith now. Next case. So this is the case from yesterday, okay? So Jacob alleged that his late father, Menachem's will unfairly excluded Jacob, his only son, on the grounds of his religious belief. Jacob had denounced Judaism before becoming a Buddhist. Within 7 months of his father's death, Jacob issued an English civil claim against his father, Menachem's estate. The basis of that claim was discrimination on the grounds of religious belief, okay, which is a protected characteristic in the UK. Much to her embarrassment, Miriam, Jacob's mother, has recently confided in Jacob that whilst Menachem believed that he was Jacob's biological father, he was not. Mediation is recommended by Jacob's lawyers. And I think a number of you will know why Jacob's lawyers are saying, you better go for mediation, because this isn't entirely clear which way it could go based on legislation in the UK. So again, thoughts on what's going on here? Anybody? So Melton, did you want to start first? If you do, then please go ahead, because I know that I couldn't give you a chance before. Have a moment to think. No problem.
I'll take a moment to think further. Thank you so much for giving me the space.
Sure, of course. Anyone? Yes, Javier. Or is that a historical hand?
Oh, yeah, that is a historical hand, but I was just thinking how this is wickedness. This is rough.
That's a judgmental comment. Yes.
Exactly. I would keep it to myself normally. I wouldn't say it out loud. But
and I wonder about that mediator bias, even though you didn't say it, thinking.
I believe that the mother is concerned that the truth of his parentage is going to come out in this case. So I feel like that's her motivation for sharing this with him now and saying mediate rather than expose the family to further shame.
Sure. So just bearing in mind that it was Jacob's lawyers who asked for the mediation, but quite rightly that Miriam did not hesitate. So that would have been one of her reasons to come to the mediation, to keep her reputation under as complete as she could. There's somebody in the waiting room, Nikki and Kramer. Susan.
Yes, good morning. Well, Jay, I might need more information because I'm assuming that Mariam is going to get some of the estate proceeds. And as the biological mother of Jacob, presumably they have a relationship. And so certainly they have a shared interest in continuing their relationship. So I see that as something to build on.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Susan. Great. Anyone else?
May I ask a question, Dr. Zaza?
Yes, Malcolm, go ahead.
In different cultures, the will is, perceived very differently. Some cultures, there is no will immediately to pass on to family members, and then there is some cultures there is will. And my understanding of a will, and please correct me or anyone, it could be by any reason you want to just pass your assets to a nonprofit, or you pass your assets to children or anyone. I'm not sure of, what's the relationship between Jacob's father being biological or not in this case. There is obviously the father yes, he had his, reasons of religious reasons, but I'm wondering if that could be, I wouldn't know what to do with it because it's a will and it is, someone's will. Do you honor the will or you don't honor the will? So I'm just very curious about this case.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the question. So a little bit about the halakha rules of inheritance, so Judaism's rules of inheritance, and Sharia as well, the Muslim one, that, there's lots of similarities between them. So in this case, and if the parties were Muslim as well, just as an additional piece of information, if they were, that the will would count. But the will has to follow the rules of the religion. So the portions that are to be inherited are scripted, so prescribed in the religious rules. And in this case, because Jacob is the only son, had there been other children and Jacob was the eldest, he would have got double the other sons. And the way that women, generally speaking, and there will be lots of diversity amongst Jewish communities, generally speaking, women could only inherit by vivo gifts. So whilst the person was alive, they would have written this will so that 5 minutes before they die, that those assets would have passed to wife, daughters, etc. And again, I'm just speaking as in general understanding and expectation. There will be lots of diversity within Jewish communities about the interpretation there. So here we don't have sisters to think about. We have got mother. Mother has inherited the whole estate, Menachem's whole estate. And here she is with her son. So let me now brace yourselves.
Wow.
Okay. That's an expression of surprise. Right. So let's get busy with this then. So what do you hear there or read there?
I personally hear that, Jacob feels like, there's some sort of envy that his mother has for him, like she doesn't like him or she wants something from him, probably the money from the estate, and he feels like she's deceiving him as well, by saying, my poor father didn't know that he was married to, so I feel like he feels deceived, but he feels like his mother is trying to deceive him as well and has deceived the whole family. So it's like, he's hurt. He's like, I can't believe that now after all this time, this is the truth of the matter. And not only that, I'm not even his son. So, why didn't you tell me this before? There's a lot of like, feelings there and emotions there that are coming out.
Thank you so much. Anyone else with thoughts? That was really helpful. Thank you.
I would also wonder what the motivation of Mariam was in finally telling her son that Jacob's father was not really his father. What was the motivation she had there? And if it was just because it was weighing upon her all this time, what does she want to do about it? What does she think is a good settlement?
So I'll just explain, so additional information, that the reason that Miriam told Jacob was because she didn't want him to waste his time and effort and money on a civil claim. One, because a civil claim could go either way, 50-50 at best. And number two, if he did involve the Bet Din, so I haven't put all this, if he did involve the Bet Din, the Jewish courts, that they would possibly, not probably, but possibly, maybe even probably actually, would reject the case because he was not Menachem's biological son. Yeah, so she wanted to save her son all that pain. That's how she saw it. So she was willing to change how her son saw her, just to save him that pain, that emotional pain and time and money. Yeah.
In the chat, we have a lot of anger identified, a perceived loss of belonging, a shift in identity, a retaliation for the extreme hurt and figuring out what the mother divulged now, the stigma of illegitimacy, perhaps.
Yeah, great. All really good contributions. Thank you so much. So thinking about this a little further, it was Jacob's father who excluded him from the will, but in this statement, he seems to have absolved his father of any blame, and now he's shifting to his mother. Yeah, I always knew you hated me. Yeah. And, about his father and how his father was duped, but there's nothing about how could my father have excluded me just because, yeah? So that's gone. So I wonder whether the interest here that we could focus them on, and of course parties will push back if you reframe it incorrectly or in a way that doesn't work for them. You'll see it physically, you know, in the nonverbal cues that no, that wasn't quite right to what you just said there. So, you know, here again, similar to the previous case, it would be the relationship. It would be, you know, so I can see that you have mixed emotions about your mother. Yeah. So that's not closing it down to, I can see you really hate your mother. It's mixed emotions so that there's space for him to talk about how he's yearned for his mother's love. Actually, what transpired was that his father had, Menachem, the late Menachem, had, let's just say, some unusual practices in the bedroom, and that this drove Mary, you know, arguably drove Mary into somebody else, Mariam into somebody else's arms, and also that she believed that her husband Menachem could not give her a child. So Jacob came 11 years into their marriage. Okay. So, any other comments before we move on to our last case? Yes, Melton.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I totally feel a sense of belonging issues. I feel Jacob is changing even his religion. It's, you know, I feel there is a belonging from releasing yourself from wanting and attaching yourself to something else. And same deeper feeling I sense from maybe not feeling belong to the family, and that is causing an internal, a deeper sense of shame. And now all of a sudden he doesn't feel belonging to the mother either. So there's lots of separation, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something in the mediation that you would try. So now I've done the mediation. It was 10 o'clock yesterday and it finished at 3 p.m. That I can tell you that it took me 4 hours, good 4 hours, probably 4.25 hours, working on the relationship building. And the money was in that last 45 or so minutes. Yeah. And what was agreed was 100K annuity. And so per annum, in case that word's not familiar. In that way that Miriam could also keep the security in case her son ever decided to, you know, cut her off. You know, she could keep the security, release this money. That was enough money for him, for Jacob. You know, he was satisfied with that. So he still got his father's legacy, and Miriam still had some security. And also because it was an annual amount that would be released, like, let's say, for argument's sake, 31st of December, that it didn't leave them with a situation where Miriam felt that, oh, okay, so Jacob's just sent me flowers for Mother's Day, or, you know, for my birthday or whatever, because he wants that money. You know, it was something that was going to be done independently of her. A trust was going to be set up, and that money would be released on the 31st of December until her death, at which Miriam's death, if she didn't survive Jacob, you know, died before, at which point all the money would go to Jacob. So we hope that his feelings towards her don't sour and that he decides to bump her off, you know, to get that money. All right. I see Ariel.
Thanks. Yeah. First of all, congratulations on a successful mediation yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you.
In such a volatile situation. As if I were mediating this case just myself, so no co-mediator, I would tend to be quite aware of the gender dynamics. And so I would be particularly cautious, and it's interesting to me that you did it this way, but I don't think that I would personally have felt comfortable reframing something so intensely angry and negative into something that might feel like I'm siding with the mother and protecting the mother by saying you have mixed feelings. when he didn't say anything about mixed feelings. He didn't say anything about anything positive. So I'm curious your experience around that.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. And the gender thing, I hadn't thought about. I have to admit that I was so wrapped up in the fact that this is the second mediation that I've been referred by a rabbi. And the reason that I was chosen, one was a Jewish Muslim commercial dispute, more commercial. So this was the case I was saying that presented as commercial, but actually it was more relationship, I would say 80-20, 80% relationship, 20% commercial. But in that case, it was probably 50-50. And so, yeah, this is the second case that I've been referred because I'm not the religion of either party. In this second one, neither Buddhist nor Jewish, but in the first one, it was considered that because I'm a Muslim woman and these were two men, Jewish and Muslim, that it would just be a bit softer. And also because of the power dynamics, because the commercial case that was purely business, or let's say 50-50 business and relationship, was after and linked to 7th of October, 23. So yeah, so that I was just wrapped in that, so I didn't think of the gender, but thank you so much. And in terms of the mixed emotions or mixed feelings about this, it's a judgment call, because there are things that Jacob will have did say, and also you can tell that I think I could read that there was a lot of desire to be loved. So this, you've always hated me, for me, I read into that and other things. Obviously, this was 5 hours, 4 hours of which was relationship. For me, I could see, I could be wrong, but what my site was telling me was that there was still a little boy who wanted to be loved and accepted. Yeah, so Jacob is actually 39. Obviously, his name's not Jacob, Miriam or Menachem, but yeah, 39-year-old. And there was something of it, in what he said and how he behaved, that I felt he just really yearned for his mother's love. So I'm going to move on, unless, Nikki, you tell me there's some more comments.
No, I think that's it. I just had a procedural question. Are you hearing this kind of a case in a plenary session, or are you going kind of from room to room with caucuses?
So this was joint. This was joint.
Intense. Very intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Javier.
Javier, yeah.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that the previous case and this case, with these men, I feel like reputation was playing a really large role. And even with Jacob here, my poor father didn't know that he was married to, that's impugning his father's reputation. He's angry about that. Like, reputation plays a pretty big role here. I think, at least with men of standing within a community, and the way they interact is based on their reputation. So when you've damaged it, you've damaged their ability to maneuver within their community. I just saw it when I looked at the phrase again. He's angry about his reputation, his father's reputation. The previous case said, my reputation within my own community is damaged because I trusted you, an outsider. That it kind of just hit me hard how much reputation is playing here. And I think when we talk about how they feel, I kind of feel that's either in the passenger seat or even in the back seat to how they're managing their reputation with the conflict. I think because for some men, that'll be more important than what I'm feeling.
And it could be that reputation is one word for it, but it's actually identity. This is that part of my identity, how other people see me. And in Jacob's case, as I say, it was his father who excluded him, from the will. And there's just no mention of that. There's now rushing to defend his father's honor and, how his poor father was duped, etc., when he's been cut off by his father. There was no doubt about that. So yeah, reputation, absolutely, Javier. And, you know, it could be that reputation is a facet of our identity, which I spoke about, you know, right at the beginning almost, how, you know, shame can be an expression of what happens in that deviation, you know, when you deviate from the acceptable norms, whatever the acceptable norms were. So acceptable norms in Smith and Fan was, you know, you do business with your own people. Yeah, that's the acceptable norm. And then when something happens to you, well, we all told you so, yeah. And here, slightly different.
I think mentioning the word reputation, I would mention it with the men because men recognize that word as social currency. It's not just identity. Identity is internal, but their social currency, the way they're interacting, it will be affected. So that's an external thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for making that distinction. Right. Okay. So we're coming to the last case now. So Adam is an imam at a faith school. His wife, Muna, has asked for a divorce because he looks at images of naked men. Adam has never denied this allegation, but argues that he has never acted on any of these interests. Muna has insisted on divorce and has threatened to report his disgusting habits to his workplace if Adam does not grant the divorce. Muna's lawyer has recommended mediation to seek custody of their two sons, aged 12 and 14, from Adam, who relies upon an Islamic ruling which allows him custody of their sons in the event of divorce. So let's think about the issues.
Those are just his workout goals.
Those are just his what?
His workout goals.
Okay. I love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From the chat, we're getting a comment, lots of shame involved, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Potentially, yeah. Mm-hmm. Shame about?
Blackmail has been cited.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Certainly in the role of an imam at a faith school, there's a lot of vulnerability. And Javier just said it could be weaponized shame.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So one thing that I've just remembered that it was an omission on my part is, you know, why do we think about, and I know we've gone quite a way now, but it just popped into my mind. Why is shame relevant to commercial mediation? Because losing money can be seen as shameful. And in a commercial mediation, at least one party may well be losing money. Yeah, let alone reputation of the business and all of that. So here, this is a workplace. It's a faith school. His wife, Muna, was actually very orthodox. So she was wearing the niqab, so the facial veil. And, you know, she said to me, look, I want the divorce from him. He doesn't want to grant the divorce. So that's part of my work as well, is helping people to reconcile or to divorce. So she said, look, I really want this divorce and I want it today. Yeah. So just to give you some additional information, because I know we're running out of time, so just to give some space for talking after, that in this scenario, actually, Muna was very, very enthusiastic about a divorce. She's got the two sons there. She wanted this to be done quickly. And Muna is the person who contacted me. Yes, she had her lawyers. She said that her lawyers had recommended mediation, but Muna contacted me, and Muna said that let's give somebody else, a former client of mine, let's say called Idris. Idris had given her my number because I had tried to mediate for Idris and his former wife, and Idris's former wife said, I'm not interested. Thank you very much. Not interested in mediation. So that was that. So we moved forward with this case, and I'll show you what was said in a moment, but move forward with this case. Adam, as I've said here, did not deny it. I was really worried about going to Adam as an imam, you know, in the other room. So this was by shuttle, because she wouldn't even sit with him, with her husband, Adam. You know, I was so nervous to say, you know, actually, you know, Muna is saying, you know, but, you know, this is just what she's saying, you know, this is what she understands, you know, all of that. And he said, yeah, she's absolutely right. I do. Yeah. But the most important thing for him, what he was saying, is that he doesn't act on it. So in terms of having any sexual relations with men, that he does not, and he hadn't with Muna for quite some time. Anyway, fast forwarding, Muna says that, look, you know, I want to have my sons because ordinarily, if boys are, again, there's a wide diversity amongst Muslim communities, but having boys over the age of 11, 12, say, would move to their father. They would stay with their father, and their mother would have visitation rights. Yeah. And as I say one more time, that there's lots of diversity in interpretation of that ruling. And so, you know, Muna was really keen to get this divorce and keep her boys, yes, with her. And she was willing to say that the reason that her boys should stay with her is because of the father's behavior, yeah, or interests. And so you remember a moment ago, I told you about how Muna got my number. Well, after this divorce had settled, I got contact from Adam maybe about 4 months later. And he said to me, you know, I want to seek custody of my sons. I'm putting a claim to court, family courts, and I would like you, Zaza, to be a witness. And I was just about to say, well, you know what it says in my agreement to mediate that you both signed, yeah? Just about to say that. And he said, because she's now married to one of your clients, Idris. So the very person who gave her the number for me to mediate is the person that clearly, you know, she had planned to marry. It wasn't just by chance. So now then, here we go. So just a few minutes left now, 3 minutes or so. So what are your thoughts? How a mediator can be part of something like this, where you're already, you know, we're in a situation where I know that Adam has very little wriggle room. You know, he's got his reputation on the line, and therefore his income on the line, you know, all sorts. There's not much wriggle room for him to be able to keep this secret and keep his job. His wife has, you know, in terms of power dynamics, she's way up there. It was my perception of it. Susan.
Well, the shared interest would be the boys and their continued relationship throughout the parents' lifetime with those children, and hopefully they can have as an amiable relationship as a family, births and, you know, marriages and grandchildren. So I would emphasize those goals.
Yes, yeah. So you're absolutely right. The interest here was the boys' reputation, the boys' well-being, their mental well-being, that, you know, if Adam was outed, so to speak, you know, he would be shamed, clearly, in front of the school. These boys were attending that school. You know, it would make their lives very difficult, bullying, you know, all kinds of slurs and so on and so forth. And so whilst this particular statement or statements here, you know, everyone will know what a disgusting imposter you are, you know, at the end of the day, what's the damage? You know, what's the impact? What's the consequences of you, Mona, spilling this information? So here it was really about, you know, not necessarily detoxifying this, but focusing on the interests. And as you quite rightly said, Susan, the interests were the boys and their well-being. So I make it 2 minutes to the hour. And I've just got one last slide, which has got the references on it. So, you know, if, you know, we've talked about all of this, focusing on the interest, avoid using the words, the same words from the offensive statement. That's just, you know, a couple more for you to think about. We won't have time to cover them here, but a couple more just for you to think about. The white privilege one is always going to be difficult. As is the African refugees. The African refugees one, I would just very quickly say that it's, you know, that I focused there on the interest, that the well-being, it was in Germany, and the well-being of the country was both their interests, so the African refugee as well as the German national. On the white privilege one, that it was very much about, you know, wanting to be understood. And here is a space where you can speak, a safe space. So something along the lines of, well, this is a, you know, a golden opportunity for you to really explain what it's like for you, rather than you will never be able to understand me. That's where I went with that one. And now the references, which, as you've been told earlier by Nikki and perhaps Maria as well, that you'll have all the slides. I'll send them, I'll share them directly after this. So if there's anything else that you would like to reach out to me about, I'm on LinkedIn, and I've also given permission for my email to be shared. Thank you so much. We're exactly on the hour.
This was absolutely amazing, Zaza. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for sharing and being with us this morning. We sometimes keep the room open for a few minutes. We have literally 5 minutes this morning before we have to a very hard stop. So if there's anyone who wants to share anything in the next few minutes, please do so now, and please be brief.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Great program. Would you please share what the solution was in the will case again? You said that there was a trust involved.
Yes, correct. So there was a trust that was involved that would pay out £100,000 each year. So the value of the estate was around the 2.5 million mark. So money would be invested and money would be paid out. And then an agreement was also made. One of the terms of the agreement was that all the estate would pass to. It was actually a gift to Mariam. So all the gifts that she had would pass to her son, Jacob, on her death.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So good, Dr. Elsheikh. So good. I had such a great time.
Great. I'm so pleased. So pleased.
Sam?
Yes, thank you very much. So informative. Just a question. Mona could have exposed her Adam or her husband at any time, even after the agreement.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you know, actually, Sam, we didn't put it in the settlement agreement. It was just so clear to both of them that it would probably disproportionately impact their children as opposed to either one of them. if it was disclosed. I'm not sure, was Jonathan first or Richard?
Richard was first.
Richard, yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I was wondering if I missed your response to the husband's request that you work with him during the second proceeding.
I said no. So I pointed him to the agreement to mediate, which said I would not be a witness in any litigation.
Jonathan?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much. This was really helpful. The question that came to me was, in trying to navigate shame within a mediation, right? If you would calling out the shame bring out more shame and the person that is using the shame against the other person? Like, how do we navigate the shame that we will bring when we, pinpoint or address that shame is being used in a negative light?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. So, for instance, in the one regarding the, you people, even the, the disgusting habits, I consider those statements shameful, so beyond, in our normal language, I'd be like, wow, that's so vile what they've just said. So there's also my cognitive bias as well as my cultural bias that, why are you speaking like that? That's so, unkind, cruel, etc., etc. So I have to put all that aside. And what I don't do is say, but that statement you made was really shameful, or I suppose you're feeling really ashamed about what was just said, because that's just going to compound it. I hope, we'd have to ask my clients, but I would hope that they understand that I see them and that I feel them without me saying, okay, so you're ashamed about that, aren't you? Yeah.
And with that, we literally have to sign off. As much as we would love to continue, Zaza, thank you once again for an amazing session. Thank you, everyone.
For having me. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Such a joy. Thank you, everyone, and for all your questions and contributions and comments. So delighted, and I hope that we'll meet again.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to seeing those who can be in person next month, May 1st at John Jay College.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.